Hemp Production.
Northwestern Pennsylvania Beekeepers Association
Presents.
And then we somehow got into the state farm show, 2010. And so I've been involved with the judging I've been involved as a chairman for a long time, and actually haven't judged anything myself, but I know how they do it. So, and this is a presentation. I threw in a couple extra slides because I wanted to include sales. Most people are going to still, a lot of what we do with honey preparation or product preparation, if you're doing it for a show, it's similar to what you ought to be doing for market. I mean, you want it nice and presentable. So that's the name of the game. So I gave a presentation, basically this, 2 years ago, about 2020, before the pandemic, at Hershey for judges training. It's very brief. I guess it's enough to keep you from being dangerous. But it's not really a qualifier, but it's as close as we can get. Anyways, so the judging is at any given point in time, it's one person's opinion. You have to remember that because not everybody's thinking the same or has the same life experience, but it's based on your knowledge and experience and the best representation of that class. And I tell the people that are judging, look professional, look like act the part, even if you don't know. Because if you don't look professional, people are going to pick up on that, and it's not good. So speak clearly, be decisive. There's two major judging systems. One is called the Welsh. It's used more exclusively in Europe. There's actually an 8-year apprenticeship to do that, which far exceeds what I'm giving you here this morning. The American system is based on USDA standards, and you can go on the USDA website and you can find honey colors and moisture and all that stuff. In theory, either judge should be able to come up with the same result. A qualified judge should be able to come up with the same result as far as the best. The department, a couple things we throw in here. This one is for us as a honey producer. So the Department of Ag guidelines, that's the Pennsylvania Department of Ag guidelines. Raw honey for the further processing shall be as clean as if run through 18 mesh strainer. Workers shall wear clean washable clothing, and you're clean at all times, hair restraints. There's all reasons for that. There's a lot more guidelines than this. This is just a couple of them that I threw in here. This 18 mesh I discovered was, it's like all over the place. But generally, it's with the thickness of the wire, it leaves about a 39 thousandths aperture. Now, I was trying to think of something like a paper clip, a gun folder paper clip. That's about the size of the hole that the screen is. You can do tighter, but this is the guideline from the state guidelines. Labeling. Most shows don't label. The farm show is judged on appearance or market. Therefore, legal labels must be attached. That's important to understand. We've had controversy at this farm show whether we should have labels or not. I ran it by the staff different times, and they said no. They like to see, because people come through as visitors from all over the state, and they see this honey. They want to know who it is, where it's from, and if it's out on the marketplace, they can go out and purchase some, perhaps. It should be the same information as found in a phone book. And since we almost don't have phone books, that's tougher. And it should include the weight in both US net weight with the metric equivalent. Proper labeling, start out with this, the name of the product. It has to name the product, and it should be pure or natural or whatever. It's a common name. Then the ingredient. If there's something other than honey in there, you need to spell it out. If you've added cinnamon or added a flavor to it, it needs to be stated on the label. Need some contact information so people can know where it came from. If there's a problem, they need to know where it goes back to. And then weight. For a show, we do not use plastic or fancy glass. So the one on the left with the red, that's fancy glass and plastic. They're really pretty jars. They make a nice product if you're out selling. But for the purpose of a show, it needs to be uniform because different size glass and different textured glass give it honey a different appearance. So we need to have it similar. Some of the equipment we use is a color comparator, a Polariscope, refractometer, scales, rules, cleaning supplies. And then, of course, your equipment as a judge, you need to bring in extra equipment just so you can do your job. So USDA has a coloring system. This is established a long time ago, but we have it's based on what's called the Fund PFUND fund scale. So we have it ranges from water, white, different colors. A lot of your local fairs, most of your local fairs are not going to break it down this much. We even combined extra white and white at the farm show because extra white is just so rare that it's almost doesn't even happen. But it's amazing when you get it. Anyway. So we have a color comparator separated into color classes so that when you're judging honey, you're judging similar to similar. Because similar colors are going to have similar flavors. They obviously light to dark, they get changed a lot. We have, again, this is called the fun scale. I ended up getting one of these digital meters, partially because at the farm show we had a competitor that would, year after year, he'd bring in honey and he'd mark it like it goes in this class, this class. They're very close, but it's like a subjective judgment call. And it frustrated me a lot because he was putting basically the same honey in 3 classes. No, you can't do that, but how do you clarify that?
Mm-hmm.
So the digital meter, like, it just took all the guesswork out of it. At the time, it was a $500 piece of equipment, but for me, it was like, it's well worth it. We actually had, the farm show ended up purchasing one for us. So only once in my life have I seen water white honey. This would be water white. And it was from one of our members at the Crawford County Fair. She had started with a flow hive, and then she was going to do comb honey, and she actually squeezed the honey out of the comb. But if you look at the vials, on the left is the master. I calibrated my machine 3 times because it kept coming up 0. So then I look at the vials, and it's like, no, they're like, that's crazy. But that's the only time. The interesting thing about honey is it does get dark over time. So in 6 months, this was up to like a number 6 on the fun scale. Just doing nothing with it, just setting. Okay, the first thing the judge is going to generally do, or one of the first things, is he'll take the lid off, and the lid reveals some clues. So if you have honey residue on the lid, then that's kind of points off. So a trick that a lot of exhibitors will do is they'll bring in an extra set of lids, because in transport you bump your containers over, and so they'll just swap out the lids just before they enter them. Fill accuracy. So if you're going into a store shelf, or going into a store and you're looking at your shelf of honey there, you want to see that it's full, and you want to see that it's consistent. It's just good for the customer. I mean, if you were picking it, you would go around and you wouldn't pick the one that's low filled. You'd pick the one that's more filled. But the way that with the glass container, we look at this first rim of the jar, and that's kind of the fill line. Somewhere in there, as long as it's consistent, that's usually that's good. Polariscope. Polariscope uses polarized lenses. Polarized lenses are vertical or horizontal. Anyway, they when we have our light in general, it's diffused in all directions. Polarized lenses will straighten the light beams, so you get shadows that you wouldn't otherwise see. So you can have a honey that's like really, really clear, but it might have crystals in it. I know at one of the state shows, we were appalled to find a big hair in one of them. Oh, man. You wouldn't have seen that without that. So what do you see? As an example of a point system, you're making a subjective call. So if there's a lot of debris or some debris or pollen, so basically clean is perfect. So anytime you get a little bit of debris, whatever it is, the judges kind of set up a guideline of where they, what they take off for each one. This is for just general. So in my operations, we screen through this big screen. I can't remember what it's tighter than an 18 mesh, and it's clean enough that we don't filter it again. And then we bottle it. Now, when you bottle, this is a little bottle, but so crystallization starts on air bubbles and debris. That's where the crystal, if you go into the ABC's XYZ books, they'll tell you all this. Those are like the Bibles of honey. So it starts on debris and bubbles and crystals. So when you bottle it, whether it's a gate valve or a pump, it's churning it over, it's adding air to the honey. If your honey's somewhat cold, even air temperature, if it's 80, 90 degrees, it's still so heavy that it won't allow those bubbles to release, and sometimes that's why your honey will crystallize quickly after you bottle it. This is something that I've been doing for a long time, so I rewarm my honey, not immediately. It's just generally it's before we put it out for sale. So this is an old upright freezer. Got a heater in the bottom, and it's set up to a thermostat on the wall, and I can program that for 110, 120 degrees, and then we can just set our honey in there, and generally overnight it'll liquefy, it'll let all those air bubbles out. It extends this, what I call shelf life, before it crystallizes tremendously. It just works. So we do a lot of that.
And Charlie, you can leave the lids on?
Yeah, we leave the lids on. And generally, the 100 120 degrees or even 125 degrees doesn't even affect plastic whatsoever. It doesn't warp it or blow it out or anything. So it's good. Now, pasteurization, and I was talking to people at Dutch Gold, is that pasteurization happens at, they flash heat it to 182 degrees. It run through pressure filters, and it gets all the crystals and debris out of there, and it eliminates some of the bacteria that would cause it to ferment or be bad. And a lot of the big, and you have to understand there's a reason behind this, these big packagers, they're getting honey from everywhere, all over the world, don't know what the source is or how clean it is, so that's a precaution for the safety of the public. As a small beekeeper, I tell them down at the state, I said, the local guy's gonna put me out of business faster than the state is, because if I put a bad product out there for sale, everybody's gonna know about it, and it won't take very long. And I'm done, until I can straighten out my act. So, I'm a small beekeeper, do a good job. Anyways, on the refractometer measures moisture. We're looking for a moisture content of 16 to 18.6%. There's an analog method, and there's also a digital method. The digital method, again, I like it a lot better. The analog is hard to, that blue to the white scale is never ever that crystal clear to me. It becomes subjective again. I like being able to put numbers on it. When we do it at the farm show, we're using two of them because they never seem to read exactly the same. So we'll do a sample, we'll check it 3 times and see where it averages. So we really try to nail that down. We use the toothpick. The toothpick is used to drop the honey on there and then to taste it. This is just us. We don't double dip, we all use a new one. But that's the only time the judge tastes the honey. So you didn't dip it or you use another toothpick. But that's the only time, that's the only amount of, unless it's really strange or wild, and then everybody's like, what's this taste like? So a bunch of people might, at the judge's table might kind of get some ideas. Because sometimes you'll get something that's, might be a little bit fermented, and it's, rather than one person making the call, you get 2 or 3 people to make that call, whether it's fermented, because that would affect the score. The moisture, there's a couple scales there. Ideally, 16 is the ideal percentage, and we score away from 16. You can go either way, depending on what scale we use. 18% or 18.6 or higher, you're actually not supposed to sell that. And that's kind of obscure. It's hard to find in the literature, in the PDA guidelines. But above 18.6, it could start to ferment. So now stores, because they run it through the pasteurization process, can understand it can go up to like 20 or 22% because they've removed all the bacteria that would cause it to ferment. But for us, okay, taste is usually not downgraded unless there's like fermentation or it's caramelized, something odd or disturbing. And they leave room for something that's exceptionally good. So nobody gets a 10, you give a little bit of room. The scorecard looks like this. We're looking at moisture content, freedom from crystals, cleanliness, from foam. It's the same things that you should be looking at. Well, we're different because we local beekeepers, we understand that there's a little bit of foam that's not going to hurt anything. There's a little bit of pollen that's not going to hurt anything. And we can talk to our customers one-on-one and understand that. And but for somebody that doesn't know what they're looking at, save you a lot of explanation if it's just nice and clean. Removing the comb honey, there's different styles of comb honey. The round one is also called a cabana. So there's a super, maybe everybody might have some idea what that is. Bees don't like to work it, that's all I know. They just don't want to work it. The basswood, that used to be the way it was done always. Now that, I don't even know if you can get the components for that anymore. It's become obsolete. We still have that category for judging. We judge those, and then the hog half. The hog half is there where the bees build from one side. I think I have another slide here. That's one of mine. The hog half, so that the bees enter from one side, and it's, instead of having two sides, it's got one side. It's a nice cassette, it's easy to handle. I don't know, it seems to sell as well as any other, but it's not that old traditional thing, it works. So when you're cutting comb, there's like a little cookie cutter thing you can buy for it, and they're looking for nice crisp edges. It needs to be drained. Inside the cassette, there shouldn't be liquid honey, it should be dry on the bottom. Again, we know that in our local market, it's not gonna make or break the sale. People looking for comb honey, there's a little bit of liquid, they're all fine with that. But for the purpose of judging, it should be dry. We don't want to see a lot of liquid in there. Comb honey score is similar. We're looking actually some points towards the container, because if you have a nice clear cassette versus a clamshell, it's nicer. Uniform appearance, total weight of entries, things like that. This is kind of looking at it so you can see where you're looking for the center line should be nice and straight. We know these are not perfect, and we're okay, and people will buy that from us. But for the idea of the show, it should be straight. The more perfect it looks, the better we humans like to score it, right? But for bees, it's all good. And for consumption, it's all good. So we have a scale. We typically look at the uniform weight, like 12 to 16 ounce. That's going to include the container. Really hard to come up with a 16 ounce piece of comb that's net weight. I mean, I get the 14, but man, if you get something that's 16, it's not even going to fit in there. It's really, really heavy. This is an example of, so this one, these little fuzzies around there, those are wax moth larvae hatched in there. And then there's the cells are not open. So generally, even for yourself, if you're doing any amount of comb honey, you should put it in the freezer. It won't crystallize in the freezer, but it should kill the eggs that are in there, so that when you take it out, they don't come around and haunt you. This is called a bleed. You see where some honey is kind of weeping out of there. Judges don't like to see that. That points off. And then there's the travel stain. So the bees actually can track this up. If it's been on there any amount of time where the bees are crossing over it, to go to the next super, they can actually track it up. And then chunk honey. Chunk honey should be, it's a first show, it should be a straight wall glass, clean. Phil talked about what I'm trying to do there. All I know is it floats. If you put the comb in there, put honey in there, the comb will float. And it's even, and people will, and again, people are okay somewhat with this. This is kind of a little dangerous because if you're putting open cell comb in there, it could be high moisture, and so the honey you're putting in might compromise the high moisture. So generally, we're looking for capped comb put in there. And chunk honey has a scorecard of its own. And again, they'll check accuracy and moisture level of what's in there. We get a full score. Frame of honey. This is a nice addition. And when I first got into the chairmanship of this and judging, we didn't have these full frames. These are any foundation, so you can have plastic, you can have wax, you can have whatever. So we're just looking at, because a lot of people who come through the show don't know what a frame of honey looks like. Mm-hmm. And this is really useful, even if it judges poorly, that's okay too, because you can go over to that display and you say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we got, this one got judged down because it wasn't completely filled, things like that. The frame on the bottom there, you can see where the bees they used some honey, then they backfilled it, refilled it because it's kind of got a sag thing going on in there. I mean, it's in cream, granulated, or whipped. It's not foamy, light crystals. We're looking for something that's not gritty. Honey will crystallize big crystals, little crystals. Some of it, there's a way to do it, but it's called the dice method, where you can introduce crystals into any liquid honey and it will duplicate those crystals all through that honey if you want to make. But we're looking for something. I don't have the time or desire to do the dice method because it's just really a lot more work than I want to get into. So generally I'll find a honey that really crystallizes nice on its own, really amazing stuff. Think touching off the jewelry, that is a really fine, smooth, amazing small crystal. Some of the milkweed that we ended up with this year is a really smooth, light crystal. Like asters late in the year, that's what's plugging up your hives. That's usually a bigger crystal. That's probably not what you want to use. But you can take that honey, this is the product you want to make, introduce it into a liquid and it'll duplicate that. And there's again another scorecard for that. And there, the one category is finest of crystals, and that's a judgment call. So the judge is going to taste it with a toothpick like they do. Beeswax. So I gave this class to people that have no idea about beekeeping. They just want to be a judge. So first off, you need to understand where beeswax comes from. And beeswax, so it comes off the scales of a bee. It's like sweat it out. I tell my kids' audiences, just as when we eat, as people, we eat a lot of sugars, a lot of high carbohydrates. Our bodies store it away in fat. The bees, they basically sweat it out as wax. So this wax comes out, and in a perfect world, it's white, and you can see it's white, and it's white on the cappings. So in a perfect world, the lighter the better as far as judging. So when we look at different waxes, you can see they'll stack there. So you can see which ones, the lighter ones are obviously what's going to judge out better. Just as a point of interest, some of the dark ones are so contaminated. I bought some from another guy one time and thought, well, I could at least make candles out of it. And it would even snuff the candles out of it. So, but it's still good as an industrial product if you want to use it for a weatherproofing or waxes or boot polish or something would be fine. So melt waxes. So if you, there's different methods to melt and strain. A double boiler works for a lot of people. Some people use a crock pot. I just have a pot that's got a couple inches of water in a big stock pot. A couple inches of water on the bottom, and I put the wax on top. All the wax stays at the top. I dip it off the top. Try to use a minimal heat when you do this. The hotter, it has a lot of shrinkage. When you pour it, if it's really hot, it will shrink and crack. The best filter I've ever found was, I got this from an EAS 95.
Huh.
It's an old sweatshirt. Take an old sweatshirt, fleece side up. It's just amazing. Like there's nothing comes, no dirt comes through that whatsoever.
Huh.
I don't even, we don't even mess with anything else. And don't use anything that's got dyes in it though, or colors, because the colors will bleed out into your wax. But just a tip. And then we have, so our judging contests have commercial beeswax. It's minimum of a 3-pound block, generally rectangular or round or whatever, and specifically not designed. Let's go back. So designed is, we'll get there. But here's what I was telling you about. So what the judge is going to see. Some of it will have like a rippled surface because it's almost shimmering there while it's cooling down, and it'll stay that way. And then if it dries, if you have a big block of it and it's cooling too fast, it'll shrink and crack. I've taken a molds, any molds, especially after this time of year, I'll put a towel around them, and then I'll even use a piece of styrofoam, put it over top, and make them cool as slow as I possibly can so that they don't crack. It's not always a solution, but it's, you gotta make the effort. So we're looking at the color. Color is straw, cran, canary, lemon yellow sort of color. Cleanliness, uniformity, free from cracks and blemish. Another crazy thing, beeswax will also pick up odors, and the judge is going to smell it. And then we'll pick up odors in a heartbeat. So be careful where you do it. I had something that was entered into the county fair years ago, and the judge is like, smelling this, like, what is this? And I smell it, I recognize the smell, and then I thought, oh, I know who entered that. It was done in the milk house. Riverside Barn.
That was me.
That was your nephew, it was your nephew. It's like it had this, wow. So, just word of the wise, experience once again. Molded candles. There's different styles of molded candles. So basically, you're looking for a nice finish, something you would buy in the store. Don't always get concerned with the seams. If you deal with the seams, it's probably better. It's going to judge better for you. And looking at the wick, you want a nice wick. Like if you were out to buy a wick, you want something that wasn't all frayed. You want a nice wick. This mold line. If you smear them out, you're going to get a better score. You're going to look at the base, if you finish the base or not base. So just a few points on that. And of course, there's another scorecard. Dip candles. Dip candles is like an old world type. It's an interesting, tough problem. I've tried to dip candles and I have done it. So you basically, before they have molds, so you put a little weight, maybe not a weight, but put those wicks and just keep dipping it. And that's a lot of work. But we had a situation where there were some amazing candles that got first and second place at the farm show. I don't know, those dip, I mean, people questioned it. They said that, like, we know what it's gonna look, would be like this, but they were straight, and I got, because we don't define it, so I think what possibly happened is somebody had a molded candle and they dipped it. Technically, it followed what they perceived as right. So now, we will notch it. We'll notch it to know that it's actually been dipped, or how many times it's been dipped. When you look at that, I mean, it doesn't, kind of ruins your candle maybe, but, so if you enter a piece of some baked goods, you don't get that back either, you're always taking a bite out of it. But anyway, we want to make the system kind of foolproof, so there's a scorecard for that, and then we have molded and design. These are some really good stuff. The one generally we don't add anything to it. This was not clarified, and this one with a little pig, the guy put eyes in it, and he ended up in first place. It was good anyways, but generally you do not add anything else to it, even structurally. Like you could, like for that wine glass, you might want to be tempted to put some metal in there so it doesn't come apart, but you're not allowed to do that. The interesting thing with some of these design waxes is you can almost weld them together. Use a hair dryer, just melt, get them both wet, stick them together, and it's like welding them. You can do some that if you have any welding knowledge, you can play with that knowledge to make some pretty interesting things. Most people will just do a simple mold like a cake dish or whatever. And there's some more of the molded design. We, at this farm show, we also do a painted. In the practical world, I don't know where you use painted, but you can do some pretty amazing stuff with that too. I tell my judges to turn it over. This is actually one that I entered. I did this, a lot of work in this, but you can't tell. So I mean, everything is beeswax, and I use different colors and painted. And the judge, I got second place against my wife. That had just a simple molded little like gingerbread house, and I wasn't going to judge. Okay, fine. But I talked to him like a year later, and I asked him. I said, "Well, he made a note." He said, "He put a note on there. It said, plate, not beeswax." I left the base open. He said his thing was so nice he didn't want to pick it up and break it. So he never picked it up and checked to see that it was beeswax. Okay, whatever. I'm there for the fun of it, the competition. But anyway, as a judge, you want to check everything.
So would that still bother you today, for example?
She got the money. So in specialty packs, as at farm show, we have this is actually this is Kathy's entry, the one with the circle. She won that basket at some other auction. It was an auction. But anyway, it's something that you, especially pack, is something that you would take for a trade or a show or raffle. And we don't get as much competition as that as we used to. It's judged for varieties of products. It's educational exhibits. We look, are the facts accurate? Is the spelling and punctuation correct? Because we've seen problems with that. Quality of the products. So they should include some product. This is a draw you from a distance. That's an individual exhibit. The individual exhibits at the farm show, first place is $120. We have 6 openings. if you come in last, you get $70. It's almost worth your while.
And the cool thing about that is we bring in the FFA to judge. It's not judges that do it, it's the kids
No,
that, it's educational.
Yeah, I actually got disturbed with some of my professional judges that would miss misspellings and some facts that were not accurate. And having 5 kids that all went through FFA and competitions, and I knew that they read the rules, and they were very specific, and I thought they did an extremely thorough job. So I have the state FFA advisor, and he brings in a young lady, young man. So we have different perspectives, because everybody sees these things in a different perspective. So I want the elder, the male, female perspective, and I think they do an excellent job of judging these. They really take it serious. And they'll come back and they'll show me and tell me why. But I think they do a nice job. The county exhibit, this is the one we did last year at the farm show. Actually, Scott and Fern Stifler set it up. So we got second place. We were $300 for that. We reimbursed them up to $250. But it's not really there to make us some money. It's more to get us out there. Go to the farm show, which is clean down in Harrisburg. It's 5 hours away. And most of the audience for the farm show is in the eastern side of the state. So we'd like to put our face out there. You know, if we can go out and be seen and be recognized, and though it's an effort for whoever's doing it, that's why I've always felt strong that we need to kind of reimburse some of the expenses of being there. Because we'll set that up 2 days before the farm show, and then they're down there the rest of the week. Anyway. And the best of the show at the farm show is this is called the Ziegler-Keeney Award. Paul Ziegler, he's got a tremendous history of helping beekeepers. He was a state inspector, I believe. But it's for the most difficult competitive classes. So it's the best of the extracted, comb, and wax. And the Pennsylvania State Beekeepers awards that. The judges it, but we pay for that silver plaque. And there's a couple reference books. There's not a lot of reference books out there for judging. The one on the left is Roger Morris, and the one on the right is one that Jim Thompson. Jim Thompson, he's from Ohio. He wrote a book as well. And as far as actually learning, there's not a lot of places to learn judging. And that's the end. Okay.
Tommy, I noticed at the Waterford Fair, they had a class for crystallized honey. It wasn't whipped or creamed, it was actually crystallized honey. Is that becoming another class?
So you can refer to it different ways. I think crystallized just simplifies it. That's crystallized, creamed, or whipped. So I think they all kind of fall into that same category, but they may have just simplified it for purposes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know who does it either. I'm curious. So sometimes some of the fairs don't have a really honey judge, so they'll use. And I actually thought during the virtual farm show, they wanted to have one judge to judge honey and maple syrup and jellies. Well, the jelly judges don't know how to judge that. I wasn't going along very well.